very sorry if this review is very long, but we really love Paris, Texas.
I'm not that sorry.
So
That's how much I love it.
it might be a long review, but I guarantee it, you're gonna love it.
Go to the bathroom, get a drink, get a sandwich.
We'll put an ad break in there for you, don't worry.
Buckle up, son. We're about to take you to Paris, Texas.
Paris, Texas, it was made in premiered in 1984 at Sundance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It won the Palme d'Or.
Unanimously, I think.
I describe it as kind of like an art film.
Yeah, possibly. Although I think it has more commercial elements. It doesn't strike me necessarily as avant-garde. It's not necessarily like a hyper commercial film either in its structure or its pacing or its narrative.
It doesn't have a very straight narrative that you could see where it's going. It takes a couple twists and it kind of like shifts gears a couple times in the movie too. It's
kind of like a triptych. Moonlight was a big triptych. It's got three very, very distinct acts instead of ones that kind of like naturally gel into each other. It's directed by Wim Wenders, and for being a foreign director, at least foreign from our perspective, I think it's one of like my favorite American Western films. I don't think that the portrait it paints of Western America is necessarily the truth, but it's the most like accurate representation of like our fantasy of that world. I think it's cool that a German guy comes to the States and makes like my favorite movie about the Western United States. We start off in the movie seeing some guy with like a beard just kind of wander out of like the desert. It's obvious that something has like happened to him, almost like he's forgotten who he is and is kind of having to restart his process of discovering the world all over again. Harry Dean Stanton, I guess, was in his 40s or 50s when that movie was made easily. He nails that childish fear and like insulation from the outside world. His brother, played by Dean Stockwell, comes out to get him when he turns up at this random little outpost. It's very slow, like in terms of how they dole out all of the information. Right. You meet Travis, and then he doesn't even talk until 30 minutes into the movie. You slowly figure out he has a son. Yeah. This person who's related to him is his brother. Even what happened to him isn't revealed until like the final act of the movie. Yeah.
I was totally intrigued by it because I think everybody talks too much anyway, and we all are aware of that. I'm not, I didn't discover this all on my own. The first third is like a total road movie. Driving down the highway, having meaningful conversations that are, until like the very end of the first act, they're very one-sided. It's kind of all Walter, the brother, doing like all the talking and getting basically nothing back.
God damn it. I'm your brother, man. You can talk to me. I'm tired of doing all the talking.
Every time they stop, you get a little bit more of the story out of either the way that Travis behaves or something that he might say, like a word or two. And all these like gloriously green-lit phone booths and gas stations and things like that. In the second half of the movie, it starts to turn into like a father-son story. Right. Where the brother kind of starts to take a back seat and the son takes the main role of getting Travis to the next step in his developmental journey. It's this really interesting family drama that kind of explodes in like the middle of the movie. You have a mother and father figure who are not the biological parents, and then the biological parent comes back in and they have to negotiate how that relationship is going to continue, because they can't ignore it and they can't stop it from happening. They get to a point where they watch like a home movie of Travis with the mother and Hunter, and Hunter sees his father for who he used to be, and the father also gets to see who he used to be and kind of wants that relationship back. He wants that family back. And that scene is really beautiful, the way it blends mixed formats, first of all, with the Super 8 kind of taking over the whole frame and whenever it's shown, and then incredible guitar work that's done on that score. Those shots of Harry Dean Stanton watching those films are like heartbreaking, and you start to realize something really bad happened between him and the mother that caused both of them to just like disappear off the map. Even leading up to that scene where they're at the dinner table and Dean Stockwell says, you know, we have some Super 8 home videos. His wife kind of says like, maybe he doesn't want to watch those. You start to realize like people are tiptoeing around their relationship and something happened.
I think that the French wife I thought was terrible.
Enter. Are you all right? What are you doing?
I don't know why anybody
Really?
picks to use a French actress for anything.
German director, you got the German doctor, the French wife, these people in this American movie.
But yeah, I would never use a French actress. First of all, you're always going to notice, you're always going to be thinking about her accent. You're always going to be thinking, what is she saying? Why did they put her here?
There's something about it that could really work for the story. Something about things in places where they don't traditionally belong. It's malleable, and I can kind of bend that to make sense for me.
You can justify it, yeah.
Travis, the whole movie, it's like he doesn't really seem to belong anywhere. And it's
especially not in LA, which is where they go in the second part.
Yeah, or in that like very domestic house. And meanwhile, you've got a really little kid
who has to go from saying, hi, Dad, to Travis's brother. There's like a great conversation where he talks to his like friend.
His little buddy outside of the schoolyard, yeah.
Friend outside of the school, and he says, I have two dads.
Yeah.
How can I have two fathers? Just lucky, I guess.
The son is in a newer generation.
He's really into space. I think he's got like a NASA sweater or something too at one point.
And that contrasts to Travis because Travis was afraid of flying. He doesn't want to leave the ground. And then there's a great scene where you finally get their relationship is growing a little bit when they walk home from school together.
Right, and I think part of that acceptance comes from that feeling each other out, walk home, where they're kind of mimicking one another, and the son starts to pick up childlike innocence that we were talking about before. I think like Hunter starts to sense that a little bit, and Travis starts to put that off a little bit more to get more on his level. And it's one of my favorite things about Travis as a father in this movie, is that while Walter is kind of like what we, I guess, would perceive as like a traditional father figure, Travis is much more like on Hunter's level, and they're kind of equals. They work together.
Well, he brought this kid in, and we've read the scene a couple of times, and he said, this is boring. I started to say, well, you don't have to fucking do it, because I don't talk down to kids, you know, or I was ready to just tell him to fuck off. There was a big, long pause, and I was getting pissed off. And finally, the kid sees this cup of water on the table, a styrofoam cup of water. And he says, will you pour that water over your head? To me. So I look at him, I take the water and I pour half of it over my head. I remember while he was halfway through, I said, instinctively I saved some, you know. And poured it over my head. And I said, now you pour this over your head. And he looked to see where his father was, and he took the cup and sort of threw it on his face. It was like a blood brother. It was like a contract. That was our contract. And from then on, he trusted me. We trusted each other.
The whole movie is very subtle. They don't beat you over the head with telling you the meaning of each scene or why they're saying these things to each other. You're always trying to just say, like, oh, obviously he's walking on the opposite side because there's a distance between the two of them. And then when he finally crosses over and meets the son, that's when the son finally accepting him a little bit more. There's a really great scene where they're already like on their way, but they're like on a highway. And I love that setting too. Like they're on a highway, and behind Travis is just like one road, like he knows where he's gonna go. And the kid, when he's framed, he has all these different like highways going all these different directions behind him, showing this kid can pick to go whatever path he wants to. And in the end, the kid decides, you know, I'm going to go with you. And
the story is kicking off, like, again. You know,
the story is shifting gears yet again, and now it's moving on to the third part of the film when they actually go after the mother.
But I think it feels very logical still because it is set up in such a way that every shot is very carefully staged, framed, you know, lit and colored in such a way that it's leading you to like a logical next piece of information. Every single detail is kind of like leading your eye to a certain place or leading your emotions to a certain place. It never feels like far-fetched, even though it's this very oddly structured thing that kind of like stops and starts like 3 different times.
The third act of Paris, Texas felt the weakest to me. Not in terms of the cinematography or like the editing or anything like technically, but just like where the story went and the reveal of what actually happened to Travis and his wife and why the story started in the first place.
A story always creates one big problem, that in order to be called story, it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I have never been able to imagine the end of any story. I can come up with 10 beginnings right now, and then if I think it over and ponder over it and travel and work on it, maybe I can come up with a middle. But that's where it ends for me.
Travis and his son go to a bank that they know the mother shows up to send money to Hunter like once a month or something like that.
Once a month, yeah.
And they do like a little stakeout at the bank. They end up seeing the mother, and they follow her to like a seedy strip club. Yeah,
it's like a Peep Show house where all of the performers are behind like a
one-way mirror.
One-way mirror.
Yeah. I really like that setup.
It's incredible. I think it's like one of my favorite setups ever.
He goes in and sort of blunders his way through, sees her like in the back area, realizes he shouldn't talk to her then. And then he goes to like the Peep Show area, asks for her specifically. Doesn't give it away that it's him, but just tries to figure out, you know, what she's doing here and what she's up to and what her mental kind of state is.
I don't think he realizes how it's set up at first. Because at first that other girl comes in, Nurse Bibbs, because he asks for like a young blonde girl in like her, you know, late 20s or something like that, and they send like the wrong girl in, but with a similar description. He figures out through her how this whole thing is set up. He figures out that they can't see the clients. It's just such an amazing setup, the way it's shot, so that whenever you're looking at the performer, you also see the shadow or the reflection of Travis's face. I think it's one of the most like realistic and heartbreaking paintings of troubled lovers that I can think of, because all these romantic films that are coming out all the time, it's like, you know, these guys, they come upon their lost loves and they're trying to win them back, and they immediately just spill forth all of this like poetry. And the interesting thing about in this movie is Travis comes face to face with her, and even though he's been thinking about what he was going to say to her for the last half a decade, has no idea what to say. And he spends a lot of the time not saying anything, and she's kind of left to speak for him and try to negotiate the silence.
Guess who this mysterious person is and what he wants.
But we see the first foreshadowing of what we find out is what really happened. When he asks her if she ever goes home with clients, and she says, "Oh no, we're not allowed to." And then he kind of lashes out and says like, you know, "Yeah, but all these places say that. How much money do you make on the side at this place?" And he like says it in this really kind of cruel way, and she almost gets up, and then he's like, no, please, like, I'm sorry, like, wait. And it's this moment where you're like, whoa, like, where did that come from? There's something inside of Travis that has the potential to be really violent and cruel, which is a perfect foreshadowing to the next time that they sit face to face.
I like the setup. Like, I like the setting, you know, they're behind this one-way mirror. They're both on opposite sides of walls. They're talking through a telephone.
Their reflections are like
overlapping one another.
Oh my God, it's great.
So everything like technically is beautiful.
Right. I think it's interesting that the whole movie takes like a polar shift, where all of a sudden Travis is doing all the talking, and it's a movie that has almost. Well, I'm not going to say no exposition in it, because it does in certain places to kind of find out like where he's been and all this stuff. It's a part of the movie that has a lot of exposition and a lot of dialogue, which has been largely absent throughout the whole thing. Usually like one of my least favorite things about movies is when you get to the end and they've held a lot of information back from you and then somebody just says it out of their mouth, you know? But in this movie, I think the reason that I still really love that part is because they pose it in the form of a story. Like, he tells her a story about a man and a woman who were in love and everything that happened, and how he became possessive, we find out, and he became almost like held her in captivity because of how much he loved her.
To me, the story was just too long.
Okay.
Like the monologue I thought was so long that I like drifted off in the middle of it.
What I like about it is that we're slowly enjoying the payoff of her starting to realize who he is through this mirror that she can't see. And she's starting to piece together the conversation that she's actually in. Because right now she just thinks that it's some weird guy who's like at this Peep Show and just trying to like offload all this like, you know, personal baggage. And she starts to realize that this is Travis. And we know that they really were intensely in love.
But it's done through like one single shot, right? Of her perspective of it? Or
I think it cuts back and forth, but there are very long takes.
And it's pretty much just like one shot that they're cutting between.
But the other thing I like about it is that we've been privy to this very quiet, unassuming, tender, kind, and gentle man. And suddenly we start to learn there were some very dark things about this guy that we didn't have any idea he could have been capable of. You see through that lens that everything he's been doing up to this point means a lot more because he's doing it in repentance for this big thing. And it probably, if that's his natural state, to be possessive and violent, that all of this stuff he's doing now throughout the story of coming back into the world, we realize now why it was so hard for him to come back. Rekindling his relationship with his son, we now understand how hard that probably was for him. We realize why he was in so much pain watching those Super 8 films. It kind of provides a context all of a sudden for the whole first two acts of the film, which I like a lot. It's almost like a much more subtle and modestly stated like Tarantino dialogue, where there's something specific that unlocks the whole movie that is held back from you like so long, and then finally you start to get it in like dialogue, and it opens up, it like unlocks the rest of the movie, for me anyway.
What kept me interested in the story was the mystery of it.
Right.
And then I found out what the mystery was, and I was very disappointed because it was so simple.
I think the mystery itself pays off for me, and it has to in order for the movie to work. So if the what happened doesn't appeal to your sensibilities, then the whole thing can very easily fall apart. It's like really, it's a risky scene. And
but there are a lot of things that do work in it. To me, like the road trip stuff, I really liked. I love the father-son stuff. It's just that I wasn't really too into where the story went with the mother.
Right.
And that's just one aspect that I can ignore it and still think that the movie was really great.
Right.
I like that it's like a European filmmaker using the American landscape, because it does feel like a very European art film, very slow, takes its time, doles out the information very slowly.
There are a lot of homages that, I mean, I imagine with like a sort of a filmmaking background, being in that location, making a film, like it's almost like how could you not do some of these things? There's the searchers shot. When they stop in a motel, he finds that Travis has disappeared again. And he goes out to the car and leaves the door open, and you kind of push out of the doorway, out into the west, and then the train comes through as he's getting into his car. So I think Wim Wenders was definitely paying homage to a lot of Western influences. What he and the cinematographer Robby Muller kind of managed to do was create this version of it that we haven't really seen before. They purposely, in the post-process, they instructed the lab not to correct the fluorescent green bulbs that were found in a lot of the truck stops and gas stations, phone booths, street lamps, which I think gives this really interesting alien feel to a lot of the places they stop. It's kind of this unconquerable land that little pockets of civilization have decided they're going to post up there, but they don't really belong there. I don't think humans really belong out there, but they've stuck their claim in it. And that's kind of like Travis throughout the whole movie. He doesn't really belong anywhere, but he's trying to like claim something and find out where he belongs. And so they're stopping at all these weird like alien green places that just don't belong in that landscape. And that's kind of like humans and the way that they've moved into those inhospitable places. And Travis, who's coming out of the desert back into inhospitable humanity. which he, you know, left violently and shockingly 4 years prior to the beginning of the story.
And if you don't know, when you shoot on film, if you don't correct it, fluorescent bulbs will turn the tint of your film green. Natural Born Killers does it in probably the most iconic way in the pharmacy scene. And you see it in this film a lot too.
It's very shocking. The real like payoff is you see Travis standing at a parking garage across the street, looking up at the hotel window, seeing the two of them embrace together, and he's standing next to his truck under this like intensely green street lamp, and he sees that they're gonna make it together.
The movie ends Travis leaving.
I was devastated about the end. I wanted to be back. I felt they took it totally personally. I hated Vim. I was devastated when 2 days before he says, "You're not going to be back with the family." I fucking wanted to kill him, you know. And I still have mixed feelings about it.
Paris, Texas is one of my 2 favorite films of all time. I have a history with this film before I ever even saw it. The big open mic in my town growing up, where I kind of learned to play guitar and I learned to perform, was run by this really, really cool guy who, in a lot of ways, kind of reminds me of like a Travis type. He's a guy who just did not belong in my hometown. He belonged like out in the West somewhere. We were always kind of like, where did this guy come from? And he played this beautiful like folk acoustic guitar music and had this beautiful voice. And he had this one song that he would play all the time called Mexican Wine. And before he played it, he always said, there's this beautiful film, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's called Paris, Texas. And I wrote this song inspired by that film. It's kind of very heavily inspired by like the Super 8 scene, this song, and it's kind of inspired by Ry Cooder's, you know, guitar score. And then finally, you know, one of our teachers at Montclair and mentors, Ben Wolf, assigned it as like a homework assignment to see this film and then do a write-up about it. So I went down to the library and I got it out, and it like totally changed my life forever. So I would 100% recommend this movie. I think it should be like mandatory meeting for every human being. And if you can get it, I would recommend checking out their Criterion collection. They did an incredible remaster for the Blu-ray, which I just saw last night. And it comes with an incredible set of bonus features. The commentary is amazing and super insightful. And it comes with a great booklet full of interviews that are totally exclusive and very cool facts and trivia about the film. And you have to check it out.
Is there something, I don't know, is there something I can do for you?
I think that Paris, Texas is a film that everyone should see. It does do a great job of telling that story in a very subtle, well-paced way. It is a 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah, it's a long one. It's like an epic.
But it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to get back down to doing this laundry?
Yeah, always putting off laundry, man. It's like, you know, I have so much laundry to do, and then all of a sudden I just start talking about Paris, Texas for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, right? I always run out of socks first.
This is a great shirt. If I thought this would fit me, I would ask if I could have this.
It looks like it's made for like a 5-year-old.
That's what I love about it. That doesn't sound good.
Sister wears this?
These are sister's current clothes?
Hi, Mike here from Rabbit Hole TV, here with our mascot Pumpkin. Thanks for watching In the Fold. If you like what you saw, please subscribe for more. And if you really like what you saw, you can check out our Patreon where you can see behind the scenes photos and videos. Right, Pumpkin? She says, subscribe.